finish burning. And so at the very end of it, this piece of paper is being put into a landfill along with all the other garbage somewhere in like Berlin, while Hal Finney is being frozen.
Cool. Okay, with that, let me start by officially starting this room. So this event is basically to give Bram the opportunity to answer any questions about how Chia is different from proof of stake. So I guess my first question is really, can you give a little history of why you decided to create Chia and what problems were you trying to solve that were different from what is being solved by proof of stake today?
Yeah, I think I am trying to solve a lot of the problems people are trying to solve using proof of stake. It's just Nakamoto consensus is a good idea. So you really first have to understand what Bitcoin is and where it's coming from. So Bitcoin is a secure distributed database. This is a really amazing thing. It's not obvious at first blush that you can have a secure distributed database at all. And Bitcoin pulls it off using one weird trick, which is if you and I, with no help from anybody else, are going to get into a discussion of what is the current state of the database, what we do is we compare the histories that we have, and both of them will have had a certain amount of blood, sweat, and tears that will have gone into producing it, and whichever one has had more is the winner. That's the trick to Nakamoto consensus. There's more to it to actually build it out. You need to not just have that concept, but you need to actually build out the whole ecosystem around it. You need to figure out this whole mining thing and stuff. And it has these unfortunate things where it involves a whole lot of miners burning a whole lot of electricity doing not much of anything, which is really unfortunate. But it does actually produce a secure distributed database with a bunch of caveats. It's not as distributed as you would like it to be. It hasn't panned out the way Satoshi wanted, because like in the white paper, he talks about one CPU, one vote. He uses that actual phrase, clearly with the vision of the costs of mining being dominated by the amortized costs of manufacturing CPUs, which probably was the case for a while, but is very, very much not the case today. So if you go over Bitcoin and what's going on with it, it really has like one, well, it has a few problems. And they're in two different categories. One of them is how the consensus algorithm works, and the other category is how the on-chain programming environment works. So the problems with the consensus algorithm are, number one, it's just extremely wasteful. This doesn't cause a huge problem with Bitcoin day to day, but it's just, at best, just really, really gross. And this business where Bitcoin fans will write it off, say, no, you don't understand. Like, all that waste is by definition the value that it's creating. Or no, it's all like green energy going in, which is, no, it's not true. And even if it was, it's still offsetting other parts of the energy market. And I think that sort of excuse making is not cool. This is a real problem. And on top of that, it's not very distributed. I mean, it is distributed, but not nearly as much as you would want. The number of big miners who would have to band together to 51% attack the whole thing is very small. They could easily do so if they so chose. Mostly they don't do it because if they did, that would undermine the value of Bitcoin in general, and they don't want to destroy the value of these rewards that they're getting in. So those are the problems with consensus, and I wanted to fix that. It's not easy to fix this. There's been, people have done a lot of stuff on alternate hashing algorithms and trying to do ASIC resistance and yada, yada, yada. That all doesn't really make any difference. And actually, early on in my looking into Bitcoin, I had thoughts about it, and someone at one point pointed me towards the Bitcoin Wizards IRC channel. So I went and got on that, and of course, immediately everybody shows up. They were like, they'd been expecting me in there, and Andrew Palstra linked me to the Bitcoin Wizards mining FAQ, which he wrote, and that one makes the case saying that ASIC resistance is a pipe dream and a bad idea. That first off, in practice, you're never really ASIC resistant enough. Custom hardware will always trounce completely general purpose hardware in terms of the energy usage that it needs. And even if it's only like a factor of 2, nobody's going to be mining on general purpose hardware. It's going to be money losing. It's all going to be off the custom hardware. And this is largely borne out since. It also makes the case that you want to go the exact opposite direction. You want to be ASIC friendly so that the market for ASICs is as commodity as it possibly can be. So there's no like single ASIC manufacturer who has much cheaper, better ASICs than everybody else. And to the extent that you're making stuff ASIC resistant, you're not actually stopping ASICs, you're just building a bigger moat and creating greater R&D costs in generating the ASICs in the first place. And that's actually a bad thing. This has since all been borne out as basically being true. Although I did argue with him. At the time, I was claiming that memory hard proofs of work have benefit, have advantages, which, to be fair, I was wrong on that point. But if you really, really go thermonuclear, it seems it is actually possible to do proofs of space, which are in some sense kind of taking memory hard proofs of work to the next level. Yes, so that original argument I got into with Andrew still is unsettled, and I will someday get him to update the Bitcoin Wizards mining FAQ about ASICs to say that proofs of space is a thing. I am going to win this argument. So the idea with proof of space is it's true you can't really get away from some resource being consumed. That's just what's going on with Nakamoto consensus in general. But what you can do is make it so that the resource being consumed, first off, isn't burning electricity in the process of doing so, although that by itself wouldn't really cut the bill because then it would just go into manufacturing the thing. It has to also be something which already exists in the world in mass quantities that's going to waste. So you can leverage the stuff that isn't being utilized. So if you thread this needle really, really carefully, you have bulk storage capacity is completely and totally commodity. You can't ASIC a hard drive. That's just useful as a hard drive. So there's no alternative there really. And when people get storage, very, very frequently, they over provision it by quite a bit. So so in principle, there's a good economic argument here. And on a technical level, you can get away with not using any real electricity doing this. Now, it proves to be quite the huge technical challenge to get that to work. When we started, I had this whole plan of doing proofs of space and time. And the only real caveats here were we needed to invent proofs of space, invent proofs of time, and polish up all the details on how to stitch them all together. I always tell people, if you're doing a startup, don't have any like new mathematical primitives that need to be invented to get it to work. I'm a complete hypocrite on that point. But we've gotten away with it. We do, in fact, have working VDFs. I personally invented the proofs of space we're using, and we figured out how to stitch everything together. So that's the consensus algorithm part. Oh, and also it's much more distributed than proofs of work are. Proofs of work have pretty significant economies of scale, and the places where you happen to have cheap electricity happen to have gotten over the hump of setting up everything being co-located there and have the budget to buy a whole bunch of hardware wind up being very advantaged, and you wind up having this kind of oligopoly of miners, which is really not what you want. Space is very widely distributed. It's a very important thing for almost everything people might want to do. So there's lots and lots of excess space just kind of spread out all over the place in the world, and should lead to much more to a much more decentralized system in very, very meaningful terms. So that's the general category of things around consensus algorithms. The other one has to do with the on-chain programming environment. And when we started, I didn't have a very specific plan here, but we've really built something very, very compelling. For that one, like, Bitcoin is like a first generation system in terms of its on-chain programming environment. It's very limited in terms of what it can do, but it's very conservative and careful in terms of how it approaches things. And it uses what's called the UTXO model, which is a very compelling way for things to work. It really scales well, is easy to reason about, and is reliable and appropriate for something that needs to be consensus critical and that you want to put a lot of money on. Ethereum does the opposite thing and just says, oh, well, we'll just support arbitrary JavaScript, basically. And that does support, in principle, everything. It does so at tremendous cost, like big constant factors on everything. And it's very unreliable and not very auditable and pretty darn scary. So we've figured out a couple tricks. I actually personally came up with some of the more important ones that make it possible to do like yet even more reliable and auditable type programming than you have in Bitcoin script using what we're calling Chialisp for your on-chain programming, and stay within the UTXO model, what we're calling the coin set model, and still, even within that very simple, auditable, reliable system, have really all the general purpose power that you get out of something like Solidity in the EVM, but without having to do the throw them out at a wall approach to the whole thing. So yeah, that's been our plan and what we're doing.
Cool. Thanks for the quick summary of what Chia is. So Goder or Kyle, did you have a question? Since you're up on stage, feel free to unmute and ask your question to Bram.
Yeah, thanks. I just kind of wanted to ask Bram and Gene kind of what, we've come up with the new consensus algorithm, colored coins, Chialisp. What are you guys kind of most excited for, and what do you think is going to have the biggest impact from Chia to the kind of cryptocurrency and banking and international payment space?
Well, I don't know if excited is the right word, but right now we are very, very focused on getting our mainnet out the door, which is happening real soon now. And then in a time scale of weeks after that, transactions are going to start on our chain. So at the moment, I'm in a very defensive position of trying to keep this from being a disaster. Is my focus right now. Yep. In terms of what is the new functionality here, what does this really enable? You start with the bread and butter, right? Like there's the very most basic things that you really want to start with, that people in the space are often very dismissive of. I think a lot of the real utility of cryptocurrencies is this really simple, like doing remittances and international transfers and things like that. And what people really need for that stuff is very, very simple functionality, like better custodial arrangements, about being able to have something like, say, a rate limited wallet, or a wallet that has, more sophisticated recovery options in terms of being able to name other people who can help you recover if you lose access to it, or having something where say you have a paper backup for your wallet, but you have a setup where if the paper backup gets stolen, but your hardware wallet is still working, then if someone initiates the recovery process using that paper wallet, you can notice that they did this and stop it. This is really, really basic meat and potatoes kind of functionality here that I think is hugely important and just not something people get excited about because it's not like a DeFi scheme, basically. In terms of advanced fancy functionality, we actually have really, really good support for colored coins, and you could build all kinds of DeFi things in Chia as well. And I think that the most basic of our fancy things is a distributed exchange. So in Chia, if you have a colored coin, if you have multiple colored coins even that don't even work the same way, you still have the functionality that someone who, say, wants to trade a certain amount of Chia for a certain amount of specified colored coin can make an unfinished transaction, which burns a bunch of Chia and prints a bunch of those colored coin. Now, this is not a valid transaction, but it's an offer. So they can then take this and post it on, like, I don't know, send it to their friend, post it on Reddit, I don't do whatever with it. And anyone who gets their hands on it can make the other side of this transaction. They can make another partial transaction which prints a bunch of Chia and destroys a bunch of the colored coin. And as long as everything nets out perfectly with the first offer, this now makes a valid transaction that can go through on the blockchain. So this is very cool functionality that I think will enable all kinds of things, and other cryptocurrencies don't support.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in on this. We very much intentionally have kind of had an era, if you will, of, let's build it, let's design it, let's R&D it, let's actually ship it. We're about to get to a place where we can shift focus, but it's still another 2-3 months before that truly happens. But the thing I'm most excited about is Chialisp, and it's all these things. When Bram and I went around raising money, we could immediately tell who had self-custody crypto and who hadn't, because we'd pull up the slide with these meat and potatoes kind of custody and controls, and people who'd actually held crypto personally were like, "Oh, these are cool," and everyone else was eyes glazed over.
Cool. Did that answer your question, Kyle?
Definitely, yeah. Appreciate it, guys. Looking forward to the project, and good luck on Wednesday.
So for those who are not aware, Wednesday is the targeted date in which Chia team announced that they will try to launch the mainnet. Are we still on schedule, Gene?
So far, so good. We do have one annoying issue for Big Sur users, but otherwise, all the things we uncovered with the super high-speed realistic launch were fixed.
Yeah, you can never test enough. So no. we're gonna be doing our launch, and we're hoping it goes well. Fingers crossed.
Cool. Craig, did you have a question?
Sure, and I apologize that I haven't been in the room the entire time, so if this has been asked, you can shut me up. But I wanted to ask, so I share a lot of your concerns about proof of work and Nakamoto consensus, those kinds of things. I never quite understood the criticism, although I've heard it made before, but just perhaps not in depth, of proof of stake and proxy staking, and why proof of space would be superior. And I wondered if it hasn't been discussed yet, if you could touch on that.
No, that hasn't been addressed yet. So yeah, I think someone asked about it, and I didn't answer the whole question. I've been interviewed enough times in my life to have mastered the skill of answer the question you wanted the person to ask. But no, I can totally answer that one. So proof of stake fundamentally is not nearly as decentralized of a thing. Nakamoto consensus really and truly has this property that everybody who's working on it today can just disappear. They can all just die. And completely unrelated people can come in and start maintaining the database, and it will all work. Proof of stake does not have this property. Just fundamentally, it's the holders in it who are controlling the thing, and it's a much less decentralized system than true Nakamoto consensus is. And on top of that, there's a long list of technical issues with getting proof of stake to work well. I think in practice, most of the proof of stake systems that appear to be working well, what's really going on is they really are truly centralized. There's one benevolent dictator who's just kind of keeping it running. And if they were to go bad, or sometimes even just disappear, the system would all fall apart. On top of that, there's a long list of these very technical issues, many of which apply to proof of space as well. And many of the techniques that we figured out for using in proof of space are applicable to proof of stake, but people haven't really fully fleshed out how best to go about doing that. Although even if you applied all the same techniques perfectly, it's still not going to be nearly as good of a system as just using proof of spaces.
There's also some kind of business and governance issues. You know, I was mentioning this on our community earlier today. The cost of ownership of a proof chain is about 55% of the total market cap of the proof of stake coin. And if you're careful and take your time, it could be as low as 40% because of the centralizing nature. And, you know, like it makes a nation state able to buy control of a proof of stake chain. And in fact, already we see this with like Coinbase having outsized control over decisions on proof of stake chains. And the problem with that is that for this successful, it's got to scale up that high. It has to be able to defend itself against governments throwing treasuries at it. And the neat thing about proof of space is, well, you got to compete in the global space market, which is already about a $90 billion business. A zettabyte shipped last year. And most of the governments are already buying a lot of storage already. So it's not like they have spare storage cycles and costs to go with. You know, we like the defense that is the storage industry and its output capabilities versus simply the cost of the market cap of the coin.
Yeah, proof of stake systems, they have this problem that not that many people in practice are really going to want to participate in the putting forth of the chain if they're just holding. So you wind up having a problem getting a quorum, which might mean that you need a relatively small fraction to be able to make a quorum, and you really don't have a sweet spot. You want the amount needed to make a quorum to be high enough that is reasonably secure, but low enough the chain can really move forward. Those cross in the wrong direction. And yeah, you definitely have like exchanges just wind up sitting on it, so they just kind of own it really. And when people are designing proof of stake systems, they start throwing in all this stuff. They start throwing in checkpointing and bonding and slashing and a partridge in a pear tree. And a lot of these things really make the problem worse, right? Like if you have slashing, who wants to bond? Like that seems like a terrible idea. And then they go, oh, well, we'll just add in bonding rewards. It's like, okay, well, now you have the problem that people might bond and they want to do all the bonding. So they actually start screwing with other people who are bonded to get them slashed or to get them like discourage them from bonding so that the first party can get all the bonding rewards. Like a lot of these supposed solutions are just creating more problems as they do it. And in Chia, we're just not doing any of this. We have no slashing of any kind anywhere in Chia. It's just straight Nakamoto consensus the whole way through, and no checkpoints, no bonding, no nothing.
Yeah, and Nakamoto consensus has one very key feature. It can recover from 51% attack, where a proof of stake chain cannot recover from 51% attack.
Yeah, if someone is transiently doing a 51% attack and then more honest power comes online, you're pretty much rescued in proof of space, where in proof of stake, once you're screwed, you're really screwed.
Somewhat related, can you speak to the transaction rate of on the Chia blockchain?
Yeah, we're going to be shooting for a transaction rate of around 20 normal vanilla transactions per second, which gets it to around where Ethereum actually is. It's actually kind of funny because Ethereum got there by just cranking all the knobs up until there are hardly any entities in the entire world that are actually capable of making Ethereum blocks. And it's very expensive to set one up. Where in Chia, we just have better engineering, so we have some good constant factors here. So even with that scale, it's still totally reasonable to run a full node on just like a regular desktop computer with a regular internet connection. So we're going for a bit faster than Bitcoin, just because computers are faster these days. But the truth is that like there isn't really that much fee pressure even in Bitcoin today. So effectively doing like double or triple that, which is like a big increase in scale, is probably plenty big enough, and seems to be in this nice sweet spot where it's still totally reasonable for just about anyone who feels like it to just spin up a full node and run it. And we really want to keep that feature because that's really big, a really big important part of it being a truly decentralized system.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, that's all I've got. I thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Craig. Hey, Dale, welcome to the stage. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you're able to say which exchanges will be listing Chia first, or when they may. If you could talk to that or not, that's okay too.
So what we can say is what's in the white paper, which is we've both been name checked by Bitstamp and Coinbase. Beyond that, can't really comment, but everyone should be very aware that there's going to be a 6-week transaction lock starting on the first transaction of the chain. So certainly, most folks probably will not list us before that 6 weeks is over, though it may be the case that some list IOUs and kind of call it non-US jurisdictions.
Cool, thanks. And do you know in that 6-week lock period will I guess there's going to be a lot of transactions between Chia nodes. Is that correct? Is that how you're thinking it might work?
No, it's farming rewards only. So in other words, only the farmers will be getting their farming rewards during that 6 weeks.
Awesome, got it. And then another question, if you don't mind, I'd love to know a little bit more of like the real world applications of colored coins and kind of how you guys see that being implemented. I mean, I'm sure that it's infinite amount of ways that can be diced, but I'm just kind of curious more from your opinion.
I guess Bram's asking me to answer. So there are a bunch of projects that looked at Ethereum in 2017 and said, we would love to take our hedge fund online, but here are our requirements and here's what it actually has to do. And our auditors are scared of this. And it's not just because it's scary, it's because the auditors can't actually audit it. And I think in many ways, the number of projects that didn't launch is larger than the things you've seen actually occur. So, there are central bank digital currencies, there are asset issuers, there's things like the muni markets. There's all these places where the current existing stuff is pretty crappy and everybody knows it. And if they had something that was, as secure as Bitcoin, but as functional as kind of Solidity claimed to be, but isn't actually, that those are the kinds of projects you're going to see. I mean, one of the things I really talk about is that we are very focused on money and money adjacent use cases. And money adjacency is big. It's mutual funds, it's equities, it's municipals, it's other currencies riding on top, stuff we've never seen yet before. What's so neat is that like you can have an asset issued as a colored coin. You can use our distributed identity wallet, and if you're a hedge fund, you can have people go get third parties to vet that you are eligible for the hedge fund, which is a whole rigmarole as well. And all of a sudden, you don't have to be there to let somebody subscribe to your hedge fund because they present a DID that proves that they're vetted by a partner you trust.
Yeah, the most basic things with colored coins are issuing stable coins and just other cryptocurrencies people might want to do on a different platform as well. Doing colored coins in Chia is really very, very different from doing them on top of Ethereum. Because on Ethereum, your colored coins are not like a real cryptocurrency unto themselves. They can't do any sort of scripting in them. That you can't like do real custody in it because it's really a program that's running on this like thing that they talk about being the world's computer. But it's very limited in terms of what you can do. It's its own walled garden, and the account balances within the colored coin are just accounts that all they can do is sign things. Where in Chia, everything is a coin. Like in Unix, everything is a file. In Chia, everything is a coin. And so your balances of your colored coin are actual Chia coins. And you can have the same kinds of custody arrangements in those as you can in Chia itself. And it also allows for the offers, like I said before, and that interoperates as trades like directly between any two types of colored coins, or between like a colored coin and an NFT, and any of that kind of stuff.
Thanks. That does give a little bit more light to it, especially on the equity side. That's kind of interesting. So if a company wanted to give all their shareholders specific colored coins, they could do that.
Well, in fact, I think we may be one of the first adopters, because
Yeah,
we'd like to make it so that you could come out of street name, for those of you who know how kind of equities work, and actually move into the colored coin, which is Chia stock. And so in the future, once we're public, we can do things like automatically pay your Chia dividend to your wallet that holds your Chia colored coin stock,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I'm a little leery of us being the first movers on that, because there have been other cryptocurrency projects whose primary use case was being a listing service for themselves, which that sounds sketch to me. So
we are likely to not be anywhere close to the first person doing that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks for the questions, Dale. Craig, did you have any other follow-up questions? I just noticed you popped back in. So
yeah, I was just trying to figure out how leaving and coming back in. I didn't want to hog up space on the stage if anyone else wanted it, but I'm good for now. And thanks again. I really appreciate it.
okay, cool. Joel is coming up, hopefully.
Oh, cool. Thanks, you guys. Hi, everybody. Just want to say I'm really excited about the project. I know Gene from Vindicia, and obviously PGP, and I work in video mainly. We do an online video platform called Iris TV, and I've always been really excited about BitTorrent, and like when BBC was using BitTorrent, I was trying to show everybody, hey, this is a really good methodology. So specifically about Chia, I've been active in some of these NFT rooms. So I heard Gene speak a couple of weeks ago about just a general overview, which is the first I've heard of it. And whenever these environmental conversations come up, I said, well, check out Chia. And I know there's some backlash on proof of space because of burst, and I know there's a couple other coins. So just trying to get the positive vibes out there, and definitely interested in researching possibilities of getting interoperability for NFTs and contracts, because I'm definitely a big Lisp advocate as well. Also looking at plotting and farming. I guess specifically, my question, which I really haven't seen come up at all, is for the farming aspect. And I know this is maybe it's not super technical, but are people running like backups? It just seems like if you get a good plotting setup, you're just going to have tons and tons of hard drive space, and then eventually those will fail, right? I mean, I see a lot about plotting endurance, but what about farming endurance? Should we be running RAID on that as well? Or?
No. If you have any redundancy in your plots at all, you're just losing out. Like you're losing out on rewards for all the space that you have. So you're far better off just if something dies and you get new storage media, just replotting and putting something on that new storage media. Unless you have, I mean, maybe in principle you could back up your plots to tape. If that's really cheaper, that's probably not worth it though.
Yeah, I think on the tape question, it's only like if you were doing video editing and you're, temporarily needing your space versus not temporarily needing your space. The issue here is like everybody kind of looks at the plot side because everybody's trying to get there from a FOMO perspective. But what you quickly learn is that there's most of the cost is in your storage, and there's more than one whale who overspent on his plotting rig and realized he should have bought more hard drives.
Yeah, I definitely, just kind of planning it out. Looking at the processors, looking at the time, I'm going to have a lot of hard drives.
Yeah.
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 And you can mount these read only, right? So like from a grand scheme of like endurance, one of the things to do is buy old enterprise drives and get another 2-3 years out of them because you're not writing to them.
Right. Yeah. Write once and then.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we've put a lot of work into making the plotting process more efficient. It is not central to Chia security that plotting be expensive, and so we really dramatically, via some algorithmic improvements, really dramatically reduced the amount of time and cost involved in plotting. There will be further reductions in it, probably not another like factor of 2 over what we've done so far, but that's definitely something that we will have some more improvements on in the future. With regards to Burst, a bunch of not good things happened with Burst, but we have better engineering and are quite happy to just welcome anyone who was disappointed in that project into participating in ours.
Yeah, we've actually been quite lucky that a lot of the what I'd call best folks in Burst have been the backbone of our community and kind of created a very different community than the Burst community had.
Awesome. Are you following these other? I guess there's 2 other proof of work coins as well. I think Filecoin.
So Filecoin is not based off proof of space. It's based off of proof of replication. So there's some counterfactuals to what you could be doing with proof of space. With our thing, the space isn't doing anything. It's not storage. It's not backup of some real world's data. It's just proof of space. The idea being you can easily set it up without having to do any like communication with the outside world. And then when you want your space back again, you just delete your plot file. Filecoin, I believe they're doing it for their actual mining algorithm, not just as a service thing. Although I'm not 100% sure on that. They changed their story about what they were doing a number of times in the development stage, and I'm not sure exactly where they landed. But they're based off of proofs of replication, where in order to get rewards, you actually have to download stuff from other people as what's supposed to be a useful service to the world. So this has a number of problems. One of them is this is at best an extremely sketchy service to be providing. And that it forces people to use a lot of bandwidth just to even get started in downloading, and then probably isn't going to do the greatest job when people are going to be reclaiming space of making it be nice and evenly spread out, and then has other types of attacks that can happen on it. For example, someone who wants to gain advantage can just start requesting storage from the system of data that isn't real data. It's like they're claiming it's encrypted data, and actually it's just something that was generated by a stream cipher. So they themselves don't have to store it at all because they know the keys to the stream cipher. But to everybody else, it just looks like encrypted data, and everybody else is using up the storage space, actually storing it in fleshed out form. So the person who did the request for storage is getting a big advantage here. There's a bunch of other like whole categories of types of attack of that type, and there's defenses that could be done against each of them, but just having whole categories of attacks that you have to worry about is really, really painful. One of the big problems is actually even the proofs of that you're doing the replication are pretty dodgy. The proofs of space that we're using are a real outlier in terms of how clean they are. They're completely not malleable. They require almost no resources to check. They're just really, really good, especially compared to everything else. The other counterfactual of what you could do that I think is really interesting, that no one's even claiming to do, is there are these catalytic proofs of space where you actually can kind of use the space that you're doing proofs of space with, even while you're doing your proofs of space. These suffer from a bunch of issues. Obviously you can't use all of it. They're not super practical in terms of the number of lookups you would have to do. They're malleable, which makes them really not work for what we're doing. That might just kind of kill them in general. They also have the problem that it's this oddball thing where if you're doing catalytic proofs of space, like you can write to the data quickly, but if you actually want to use the data, you have to do this whole process to recover all of it, which makes it extremely inconvenient. No one's seriously proposed using those in a real system, but they're really great academic work and really neat stuff, actually, that I wish there was more focus on that research. It's really good work. But the proofs of space that we're using are very, very simple. They don't require you to download anything up front. They require like almost Zippo resources while everything is just doing its farming. And they have like really good, solid theoretical work underpinning them.
Yeah, and I'd add, the Filecoin guys, the storage guys, both teams very competent, very real. But on the business side, I always joke that you really don't want to go up against Jeff Bezos on something that's a commodity that he's good at on price.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, that Mojo Nation, that project that I mentioned, was trying to do the same thing. It had literally the same model as Filecoin. There's like nothing new here. It's like, it's everyone, please stop making those same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys have a really novel plan here. I guess there's also Space Mesh that people are talking about on some of these other
Yeah,
the NFTs.
Space Mesh is actually using a proof of sequential work that I came up with.
Wow.
Space Mesh is just not built on as good of technology as we're doing. They're doing this like weird like thing that kind of does proofs of space to gather up temporary proof of stake kind of ish things and do a proof of stakey kind of thing for a while and then gather more space and things like that. They're just not using as good of engineering as we're doing. What we're doing is very like direct, nailed down, solid stuff and doesn't require building this whole set of gizmos on top of each other in order to nominally get the thing working. There's like very, very difficult problems about how do you address grinding. And we have like very direct answers to those rather than just building this gadget.
Sounds awesome, guys. I really, I will definitely keep spreading the good word about it. And then, yeah, I guess if there's, maybe I'm going to definitely look into Chialisp some more. I wonder if we could come up with some kind of Solidity Chialisp port or something, or maybe some kind of...
No, you can't, for actually a good reason. And it has to do with this business of everything in Chia being a coin. So a big part of why Chia full node scales so well is because all they need to do in terms of the data they're storing is keep track of the current coin set. Where in Solidity, there's this, in the EVM, there's this very rich data that you need to keep around whose behaviors are very, very subtle. And it's very tricky to implement them in a reasonably consensus critical way. Where Chia actually gives you like very meaningful real costs for making coins, which is the only way you can have persistent storage of stuff. So, and when a coin is executed, it's in this the CLVM language, which has no side effects at all. It's this extremely pure language. It's the language for people for whom Scheme was just way, way too complicated. So it requires you have to think in this certain way and understand how it is that you build capabilities in this kind of system, and how it is that you have persistent data in this kind of system. And there are tricks that enable those things, but it's never going to be just, oh, here, I'm going to take the Solidity program and move it over, because you have to conform to coins being the only kind of persistent data that you have, and that all your actual code execution is happening in the state transition of some coins getting created and other coins getting destroyed. That said, anything that you write to work in this thing, because it's all in coins, it all just like automatically interoperates with everything else that is just using coins as well. So it's very, very powerful in terms of how it works, but it does require you think about programming somewhat differently.
So,
But for those of you who've been following along on the RCs, it's kind of important to know that our Chialisp and CLVM team has been going through very serious mountain moving to get a bunch of changes that we wanted in that needed to be there before we launched the final mainnet. As such, what we want to do first is kind of build a Solidity developer's guide to Chialisp, and have that view of it. Over the medium and long term, though, there are tools that will make Chialisp necessarily more like, something you can do vertical pieces of in JavaScript or in Python.
Awesome. So I guess if the coins are the first class objects, and is everything immutable then in Chia?
Yeah, the only thing the vernacular is Chialisp is the equivalent of Solidity and is a higher level language that can be iterated on without changing consensus. And the actual consensus critical thing everything runs in is the CLVM, which is equivalent to like the EVM in Ethereum. But yeah, the CLVM, everything is completely immutable. And when you have a coin, if you know any Bitcoin vernacular, when you have a coin that's called the equivalent in Bitcoin is called a UTXO. And then each coin has a what we call a puzzle, which in Bitcoin is your script pub key. And then if you want to spend a coin, you have to produce a solution, which in Bitcoin is called a script sig. And then the puzzle gets passed to the solution, and it either fails or it says, yeah, this is okay, and gives a bunch of conditions that have to be met in the outside world for it to work, generally, mostly including creating some output coins and some aggregated signature assertions. But the net result of this is there are side effects, but the only side effects that happen are that coins get created. The CLVM itself doesn't support any side effects whatsoever, just supports return values. And the conditions of those return values are what really create the new coins that are made with the spending of this coin.
Cool. It's a lot more secure without those other side effects and beacons and different things that could go on, right?
Yeah. People cringe a bit at me telling this joke, but the general feel of Chialisp is, if you're familiar with the programming language Brainfuck, it's kind of like if there was a functional version of Brainfuck.
Oh, okay. All right. Nice. Hilarious. That's great.
Okay. Thanks for the questions, Joel. I think Adrian is next, and then afterwards it's Ali. So Adrian, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for letting me up. If this was asked before, sorry. One question was it or is there some protection against mining with the CPU, GPU? Not mining, sorry, plotting, because I remember there was some coin where this whole process could be circumvented through using the CPU.
So
Bram, can I hop in 1 sec? I just want to tell you this.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about Burst was step 1 was install Burst, and step 2 was install a protocol breaking change to go faster.
Yeah, so that was really two questions. That there are two activities going on here. There's farming and there's plotting. You can most definitely, you could most definitely speed up plotting using custom hardware for doing it. It's probably not worth doing because, as we were discussing before, plotting is already cheap enough that it's pretty easy to overinvest in any sort of plotting setup that you have. Most of your costs are going to be dominated by just having the storage there, and you can do the plotting on your storage that you have anyway. And even if you had a very, very fast plotting rig, it would be impractical to grind on it. There's no way it could possibly plot fast enough that in responses to challenges coming in, it could repeatedly replot and kind of get repeated use out of the same storage by having multiple plots in existence over time during the time when that challenge was active. We've been very, very careful to design it in such a way that it's quite a few orders of magnitude away from being practical to pull that off. The other question is about farming. Could you get any advantage to farming? And the answer is no. You could not. We actually had a paper in AsiaCrypt giving the fundamental construction of what we're doing, and the one that we're using is a few iterations deeper on top of that one, and we really have these this very solid foundations, solid theoretical foundations to the proofs of space that we're using, where there really isn't much of any benefit to it. And actually, well, not just the underlying proof of space itself, but in terms of the whole protocol, there are what's called grinding attacks, where because you made it so that it doesn't really cost anything to farm, now you have these problems that someone can go, okay, well, I'm just going to run forward like 1 million or 1 billion versions of the history and pick out the one that worked out best for me. And there's all these questions of how you go about stopping that. And that's something I've spent a huge amount of time working on. There's a bunch of techniques for it. One of them is that our proofs of space are non-malleable. I keep using that term, but the idea being that when you make a proof of space in response to a challenge, there's only one way of expressing that response, just byte for byte. It must be exactly this response. That helps a lot. There's a whole bunch of things about where your challenges come from that help a lot. There's also this thing where we include proofs of time are a necessary ingredient in the whole thing. The proofs of space are really the hero of the show, but there are proofs of time kind of working there in the background. There is a time lord somewhere out there pulling the whole thing forward. So there actually is a third thing here where there's a question of, could you have ASICs that speed up Time Lords? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can, in fact, have ASICs that speed up Time Lords. What you really need for the system to be secure is for no one entity to have a ludicrously faster Time Lord than everybody else's. So one of our projects is going to be actually making as good of an ASIC as it's physically possible to make in this universe for our Time Lords, and make the copies of that be in a whole bunch of different people's hands, so that you're not trusting any one Time Lord. You have high confidence that someone out there is going to be acting as a spoiler who's the honest Time Lord, which is keeping anyone else from being able to gain advantage by running things with a faster Time Lord.
Hey, Bram, let me ask a softball intentionally. How did we choose K? Will K change? And what does K do?
Okay. So there's a question of what is the smallest plot size you can possibly have. So there's trade-offs here where if your smallest possible plot size is too small, then people could possibly attack the system by grinding it, like I was talking about before, where you repeatedly regenerate plots in response to a challenge. And if it's set too big, then then plotting, it takes an uncomfortably long time, and it might be a little bit quantized, that if you have a certain amount of storage capacity and it just barely doesn't fit a plot at the end, you have a certain amount of underutilized space for your farming because of just quantization of the size of your storage media. So he set K32 as a pretty good and fairly conservative sweet spot here. The idea being, we really want it to be that whatever plots people make today, they'll be able to keep running very, very far into the future, for years, if not decades or centuries. Maybe storage will be so gigantic in the future that even the very, very minimal amount of lookups required with K32s will become problematic. If you've got a zettabyte, sitting on your desktop, and it's all in K32s, then the number of lookups you would have to do in response to a challenge might be so gigantic you just couldn't pull it off. So we do support larger K values. We've set the rewards such that if you have a certain amount of space, the amount of rewards that you get for that amount of space are independent of exactly how you've sectioned it. You can have any size K values for your individual things. What's really going to matter in terms of the amount of rewards you get is the total size of all your plots put together, regardless of their makeup. So right now, K32 is pretty standard. K up to 50 is supported by the protocol. K50 is about 300,000 times as large as a K32. A K32 is about 100 gigabytes. So we're not anticipating that becoming a problem, at least not within my lifetime. I anticipate someone hundreds of years from now will be cursing my name with some simple fix that we could have done today that would have made their life a lot easier. And to them, I'm sorry, I'm doing the best I One thing I should mention as a caveat, we really put a lot of work into compressing plots as much as possible and making the plotting process as efficient as it possibly can be. There are some known optimizations that aren't done yet. So in particular, the biggest one is it's possible to Hellman attack the first table in our plot file format. And so once someone implements that, you'll probably be able to run a whole bunch more plotting work on the plots you already have and compress them another 10%, most likely. That requires a whole bunch of work by someone who has a deep algorithmic understanding. But just FYI, that's likely to happen and become standard in the future.
All we will do is make our OCD farmers unhappy who have their drives perfectly filled.
Thank you.
Great. I think
Very
it's
sad.
Ali's turn. Thank you very much.
Hey, newbie here. In a newbie question. When you're designing something like this, is the goal or is allowing speculation, price speculation, a good thing, or is the goal, one of the goals is to somehow implicitly make the economic value of a coin predictable and somehow peg it to a real world thing?
Yeah, I
implicitly?
view the price of cryptocurrencies as like one of the least interesting aspects of them. I know people get really excited about price rises. I prefer to focus on all the technical aspects and making them be something really useful. As far as there's limits to how much we can control, right? We're setting it up so that at least once transactions start, that we could just disappear. Like the Chia, the company, could just like blip off the face of the earth and everyone involved in it be gone. And Chia, the protocol, would just continue to chug along and work. And within those parameters, we have very, very limited ability to control what's going to happen with the price. It is just out of our control pretty early. The Chia, the company, does have a pre-farm, which we're mostly just going to be sitting on for a good long while after everything launches. And the most we could do with that is just sell and depress the price, but not really fundamentally change anything about the security of the system. But our strategy is going to be we just sit on our pre-farm. One thing that we are doing during the rollout is there's going to be a period of mining happening before transactions are allowed to start. All transaction blocks have to be empty up until a certain point. But when transactions do start, there will be some amount of liquidity from these farming rewards that people have already gotten during that initial period. So that will allow some coherent price discovery to happen just as soon as transactions start, but not from us, but other people presumably will be providing liquidity at that point. We don't want to do, like, Zcash kind of bungled this pretty badly, where like it turned on and literally there were just no tokens to be had. There was zero liquidity in it, so the price like went up to infinity and then crashed down super fast afterwards, and a bunch of people got screwed trying to buy immediately. And we don't want that to happen, so we're doing this kind of staged rollout. But other than that, we don't have any specific plans to do particularly coherent price controls on it.
Yeah, we want our farmers to be able to set the price. They simply can make the choice about where they are willing to sell.
Is that a choice, or is that some mathematical property, like you can prove that something like that cannot be done?
Which that is the question.
Like pegging the price implicitly to some real world thing.
We're not real interested in pegging the price. Longer term, we might be interested as a public company, past being public, in setting kind of vague guidance about where it should go, but it's in the like quarterly kind of time dilation, not in the daily.
Yeah, we might be doing something where we're like a public company, and a lot of things that we might wind up doing might be along the lines of like it looks like our share price and the price of the assets we have on the books are misaligned, so we might like make some kind of an adjustment there.
It's more like stock buybacks, effectively, right? But our coin is not designed to be a stable coin, to kind of go to the core question. Our coin is, however, designed to be the platform upon which stable coins could work really, really well.
Yeah, although, of course, we can't attest to any particular stable coin actually sitting on the amounts of funds they claim they're
Correct.
sitting on.
You always have caveat emptor on your asset issuer is who you have to trust. But one of the things we can do, and one of the things neat about our public company strategy, is that for people who want to use Chia as a base layer to do like a central bank digital currency or a, you know, U.S. bank-backed central currency, you can hedge our stock once we're public and limit your exposure to volatile moves of the coin.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your question, Ali. Tarn, you're next.
Hey, Richard. Hi, Gene. Hi, Bram. Great to see you guys again. Hi.
Hey.
So I see a lot of designers in this room too. I was actually going to ask this question, and perhaps, you know, they'll probably continue follow up. This question is about NFTs on Chia. I think there was some discussion, and my assumption is it'll be fairly easy to do that.
Yeah, well, we've already built DIDs on Chia. There's a question of what is an NFT, what functionality makes an NFT. But I believe a DID is already a very fleshed out, much more functional version of an NFT than what people are usually using as implementations of NFTs on the blockchain. There's maybe a little bit more we can do in terms of it really like attesting to what coin created it in the first place, so that people can easily check like what time that happened and stuff. I've been asking people about NFT functionality, and it's been this kind of disappointing thing that it seems the underlying contracts people are building on NFTs on are not very functional, and nobody really cares that like the NFT attests to what it's representing, but there isn't very much going the other way, that if you want to do a lookup of like a particular piece of like art to what NFT represents it, there aren't good databases of that. And partially that's because it's a pain, because you do have to do some kind of real world human name lookup to make that happen. But yeah, there apparently is like a real problem in the world of NFTs where people issue counterfeit NFTs for things that just claim to be representing blah blah and then go ahead and sell it on the exchanges, or they're like issuing a legitimate NFT, but they issue it on like 10 different blockchains and things aren't checking for the like repeat issuance of the exact same thing, and people successfully repeat sell it. So a lot of the serious security problems, they're just not taking them very seriously, unfortunately. So we can at least do as well as what people are doing already in this space. I think we can do better than that. Although it would be nice if people had plans for making a better platform in general.
Awesome, thanks. That's all I have right now.
Great, thanks for your question. I think it's Yael is next.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me up and for having this conversation. I'm a curator in Los Angeles, and I've been working with the museum and gallery world for years. I currently have an exhibition of Ai Weiwei's work at the Skirball, and I've been interested in art and technology for a long time. Actually, Weiwei did a project, an NFT project on Ethereum back in 2017. So he's a sort of interesting person to think about in terms of this technology. But, you know, in the art world, as in the broader NFT world, I guess, people are talking about the environmental impacts a lot. And, you know, to that point, I think it is a very, very big issue. I also think to myself that the the mainstream traditional art world as it stands right now is incredibly environmentally wasteful with all of the art fairs. And if one were to just look at the carbon footprint of the Venice Biennale, for instance, it's quite significant. So I see the NFT movement as a step in the right direction. And when I heard Gene talking about Chia on Clubhouse a few weeks ago, I just got really interested in what this could mean for the art world. And I'm really excited about you guys potentially having a platform, but I'm working on some pretty high profile projects, and I'm researching and writing everything you're saying down, because I want to see if it's possible to do something with Chia.
Yeah, the environmental concerns are very much a real thing. That's certainly why I personally have never bought any Bitcoin, as I just don't want to contribute to that. And we're improving on that with Chia. Right now, in terms of practical, getting stuff up and running, we're just in the process of launching our blockchain to begin with. So it's not like you can just start doing stuff tomorrow, but we are going to be working on fleshing out the whole ecosystem around it. And my hope is that the existing vendors will start supporting Chia as a platform for what they're doing, just because it works better for them, because it's more featureful and greener.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited about it.
And also, I'm easy to find, and feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you so much.
One thing I like to say, because I looked into this myself, because I come from the gaming world, and gaming and NFTs is a thing. One thing I really find exciting about what Chia is providing, at the base level, they're going to provide a DID solution, and having a distributed identity or decentralized identity service, I think is really important, because knowing who actually created that artwork and can tie it to authenticating that that is that person, because he or she owns that particular keys, is one step better than a lot of solutions that are out there already originating NFTs, because you don't even know if that's the person who actually created that or not. So because you don't have a good KYC DID system built into the blockchain. So okay, I believe Manu is next, correct?
Hi. Yeah, actually, my question was, is Chia compatible? Is EVM compatible? That's the first question. And the second question, I think, is regarding about the green aspect of Chia. What is it? What is it about? I'm just learning about Chia today. Well, actually, Jael mentioned it like a few days ago in another NFT room, and I remember it, and that's why I came in.
Yeah, Chia's on-chain programming environment is very, very different from Ethereum's. It's, in my opinion, a better environment, where things that you write in it are much more auditable and reliable, and altogether more appropriate for doing things that actually involve money than the EVM is. But it does require that you.
But can you do a smart contract, Bram?
Oh yeah, you absolutely can do smart contracts with it.
Oh, nice.
But it requires that you think about things in a somewhat different way. Hey,
Daryl, can you?
For a pretty good reason, that it's kind of like everything is a coin, and this forces you to write things in a certain way to make everything be a coin. But once you've done that, it makes it very easy to reason about things, and it makes it so everything can interoperate, that all the different smart coins can work with each other in very direct ways and don't need to build any sort of special communications between each other. In terms of what makes it green, Bitcoin has huge amounts of electricity waste. That the mining of Bitcoin involves custom hardware burning electricity, basically just printing lottery tickets. And so that's burning a huge amount of power to make it happen. And with Chia, Instead of that, you basically have this storage media that's just sitting around kind of bored, and it's basically full of bingo cards. And when challenges come in, you go and look up what bingo cards you have, and you have to respond pretty quickly because of the proofs of time in order for it to work. And there's really essentially no electricity being burnt in the process of that doing. So that's why it's much more environmentally friendly and less wasteful.
When you say that there's no electricity, then how does it run?
Well, it's a very involved thing, but it basically is this bingo card thing that. It's also important when I say almost no electricity. Like if you're running a full node, that's hardly using any electricity, just in general. The waste of mining Bitcoin is really on a completely different scale than the regular, like, oh, my computer is up and running an application. Like that's a very, very tiny amount of electricity to be happening. Where on Bitcoin, you have these like literal warehouses full of computers burning electricity.
Yeah,
But that's isn't it what is protecting Bitcoin?
no, it's not. So let's back up about electricity for a second. It's not no electricity. It takes a little electricity to plot, and it takes a little electricity to spin a drive. But there's a heck of a lot of trapped storage space that's going to spin anyway. So there's a big piece of this number, which is that. The other thing that goes on here is macro side. SSD, consumer SSD, is going to be cheaper per terabyte than storage that's spinning. So, old iron disk. When that happens, that's like 3 orders of magnitude less power to keep a terabyte online. And, that really throws the kind of same security number way down. So to give you a sense, if the SSD never flipped and you had to get to Bitcoin's total scale with Chia, we'd be 300 times more efficient per unit of security. We're more likely to be like 20,000 to 30,000 times more efficient for the same unit of security.
Yeah, we're using proofs of space and time instead of proofs of work. So what's storing the system is a really very fundamentally different thing. So in Bitcoin, there is a reason why it's burning all of that electricity, and it is helping secure it. It's really unfortunate that it's necessary for the workings of Bitcoin for it to work that way. And a lot of the point of Chia is really to go through all the technical work to eliminate the need for that, which is quite non-trivial to do, but we've done it.
Nice. Can you explain a little bit more about the concept of proof of space? I'm new to the concept.
Yeah. So proof of space, the idea is you have your hard drive or maybe a whole bunch of hard drives that are just kind of sitting there. And when a challenge comes in, the bottleneck on how good of a response you can have to this challenge is how much space that you have that's sitting there, that has these what we call plot files sitting on it. And intuitively you can think of what they're doing as being filled with bingo cards. And so the more bingo cards you have, the better of a response you can make to challenges that come in.
Thank you. I'm gonna read a little bit more about it.
You can go to chia.net, their website, to learn more about it. And thanks for your question. I think next is Mayan.
Hello. So, if I'm not wrong, this network is unhackable because if you have to hack the network, you have to basically have all the plots. If I'm right or wrong.
Well, we are subject to 51% attacks like Bitcoin is, but it's very, very hard to pull that off. There's just so much space in the world that's so distributed. It's very, very, and your costs are so amortized with getting your hands on the stuff up front. And most of the people who have it probably just acquire it for an unrelated reason beforehand anyway. That it seems way, way more implausible for someone to pull off getting control of Chia, especially as compared to like doing a 51% attack on Bitcoin, which would just require a cabal of like 3 big miners deciding that they collectively want to take over the system.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like after 10 years. I think after 10 years it will be completely unhackable, no matter how fast the SSD comes, no matter what happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, economically, we should soak up the unused space pretty cleanly and clearly, and then you have a problem of more SSD, and there's limits to that from physics.
Yeah. As a practical matter, it looks very, very secure. I don't want to say unhackable because, in principle, like space aliens with like super amazing technology, if they manage to connect, could, in principle, take over the system. It's just that, as a practical matter for us human beings here on planet Earth, with the way resources work in the real world empirically, it seems very, very unlikely that anything bad will happen.
Great, thanks for your question, Ryan. Do you have a follow-up, or
No, that's
we'll move
all.
on to?
Thank you.
Great, we'll move on to Daryl. And I think, Daryl, you'll be the last person today, so we're running a little long, and I'm sure Bram and Gene has other things to do. So
Great. Well, I'll start with first off, it's just been super awesome. I've been having a ton of fun plotting and farming against Chia. It reminds me of like mining Bitcoin back in 2011 and 12, when you could just grab laptops, desktops, just any used hardware, and just keep plotting and growing and expanding without, needing to buy all these specialized expensive GPUs and everything. My question is, I've been helping other people get set up with plotting and farming, but how long do you guys see before we'll end up needing to go to pooled mining, have them replot with some of these bigger, storage whales coming online and being able to expand a lot quicker than, the standard everyday user?
So I really prefer people don't use pools. However, we have built-in hooks for pooling protocols into the system. We are going to be making pool protocols in the future. The number of like reward events per day in Chia is like 10, or I think it's actually 20 times as much as it is in Bitcoin.
Yeah, 144 versus 4608.
Yeah. So the So the so a much smaller farmer, as a proportion to the size of the system as a whole, is going to get their rewards meaningfully smoothed out just by random chance. At some scale, it does sort of become more like buying lottery tickets, that your expected number of reward events that you get is like one per year, and then it's just noise. You like probably won't get a reward, and maybe if you get really lucky you will. And at that point, you really do want to be using a pool if you're one of those really small ones. We've put in the hooks for pool protocols. We're going to be fleshing out our pool protocols once our mainnet is like launched and working. That's one of our high priority things to work on. There's really two kinds of pool protocols. There's the one where you don't need to like have a transaction on the blockchain to start anything, and that one's really nice because you don't have to pay a transaction cost up front. You can just get your stuff up and running and go, and requires very, very little coordination. By popular demand, we're also going to build one which has the ability that which makes it possible to jump between pools. That one has the downside, well, it's a little bit less private, and it has the other downside that it does need to have a transaction on the blockchain to get it started, because if you want the ability to switch between pools, you need a piece of data on the blockchain that says what pool your rewards are currently going to. So there's these trade-offs between the different pool protocols. We're going to be fleshing out and building at least a prototype of both of them, if not coordinating like a standard that like all the pools support. And we've engineered it so that you don't need pools nearly as much as you do in Bitcoin. But yeah, we're going to be fleshing out and improving on this as time goes on.
Yeah, I'd like to add, all of us who are very native to cryptocurrency kind of are like, I want to win every day. But if you take a different view of it, there's a whole community of folks where you kind of get back to the original Satoshi vision of folding at home or SETI at home, where once our software is able to plot automatically for you from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., pause, resume, manage your empty storage, all of a sudden you can be a validator of the network and maybe only win one reward a year. But if you roll forward on that price point, that might be worth more than your computer. And so it's kind of like setting at home, except a lottery ticket too.
That's great. And again, I'm just having a ton of fun over here. So great job on where everything's at, and really looking forward to the launch.
Yeah, we want everyone to farm, right?
Yeah,
everybody can farm.
Yeah, glad you're having a good experience. We're really trying to make the usability of our software hold up to the standards of like consumer internet software.
And I apologize here and now about where we are so far.
Yeah, we want it to be something where really, truly non-technical people can use it just fine.
Awesome. That's a great way to end this today. Feel free to follow Bram, Gene, or myself for future, I would say at least once a month, but we'll see if we can do faster than that pace of Clubhouse events where we'll focus on, getting people more up to speed on Chia. And I'm a big proponent of Chia, and I'm hoping to spread the word myself. So I thought Clubhouse is a great way to do that. So if you feel like you want to, feel free to follow Chia Crypto Blockchain, the club, or follow any one of us, and we can get you invited as well. So thank you again for showing up today, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks
also, thank
Bram
you, Richard,
and
for
Gene.
pulling this together. Thank you for pulling this together, Richard.
Oh, my pleasure. So have a good day, guys, and thank you again for coming.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.